Just a few hours from now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will visit President Trump at the White House here in Washington. Now, the meeting is coming at a critical moment for the conflict in Gaza. Just last week, Israel agreed to a U.S.-brokered ceasefire proposal. Hamas responded with amendments, but announced Friday it had a positive response to the deal. A sense of urgency is underneath today's meeting as Trump floats the possibility that, in his opinion, an agreement could be reached by this week. Joining us now with more on this, CNN's Kristen Holmes and Jeremy Diamond. Kristen, let's start first with you. You're there at the White House where there was just a press briefing ahead of the visit from the Prime Minister. What did they say when it came to this topic?
Yeah, Jessica, I think one thing to note is that President Trump, when he came back from NATO about 2 weeks ago, said he believed there would be a deal on a Gaza ceasefire within the week. Obviously, we've passed over that deadline, but there was some hope among White House officials that by the time Netanyahu got here on Monday that they might have something to announce. Obviously, again, that has not happened. Instead, the press secretary said there were a lot of things that the two leaders were going to discuss, particularly in the region. Take a listen.
The utmost priority for the president right now in the Middle East is to end the war in Gaza and to return all of the hostages. Also, as you know, there was a ceasefire proposal that Israel supports that was sent to Hamas, and we hope that they will agree to this proposal. We want to see all of the hostages released. That's on the top of the president's mind, so that will be discussed, as well as the many other positive developments we've seen in the Middle East.
And one thing to note about this meeting, I mean, usually when you have the world leaders come to the White House, they do a meeting in the Oval Office. Instead, this is a private dinner behind closed doors with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And Caroline Leavitt was asked about that as well. Was this because of sensitive issues? She kind of brushed off the reasoning to have this behind closed doors, not in front of any reporters, not really in front of anyone, and then went on to talk about the various things that those two leaders were going to discuss. She did not, however, get into any details about that proposal that was given to Hamas.
And Jeremy, I want to go down to you. We heard the White House is preparing to send its special envoy to the talks in Qatar. What is the latest on those negotiations at this moment?
Yeah, well, we are now in the stage that is known as proximity talks between Israel and Hamas, meaning that they are in, basically the same location, separate rooms, a messenger kind of going back and forth between those rooms so that you can try and reach agreements in this final stage of negotiations on some of the outstanding issues more quickly than the several days that it sometimes takes on every single issue over the course of these indirect negotiations. But even as these two sides are now closer than they have been since the last ceasefire collapsed, we are still seeing that there are still significant sticking points between them. We saw on Friday as Hamas delivered what it described as a, quote, positive response to the latest ceasefire proposal that Israel had agreed to, but offering some amendments to it. The Israeli Prime Minister then said that those amendments were unacceptable to Israel, but despite that rhetoric, still sent his negotiating team to Doha, Qatar. And now, as we are learning that Steve Witkoff is also going to get into the mix, traveling to Doha later this week, according to the White House. That suggests, on the one hand, that the White House is very focused on trying to get to an agreement this week, if it can. But at the same time, it also suggests that the need for a senior official like Steve Witkoff, who has been intimately involved in these negotiations for months now, suggests that there are some big sticking points here that require a bit of a more senior hand. And beyond that, make no mistake that the negotiations aren't just happening in Doha. They very much will be happening at the White House tonight as President Trump sits down for dinner with Prime Minister Netanyahu. One of the key things President Trump has said, he wants this ceasefire to lead to an end of the war in Gaza. That, for now at least, is incompatible with where Prime Minister Netanyahu stands. Make no mistake, that will be a big part of the discussion.